The day children changed the world. As the morning light crept into my room, I slowly opened my eyes and stretched. For those first few minutes of consciousness, today felt just like any other day. I'd get dressed, have breakfast with Mama, and rush off to a long day of school with my friends. But then I remembered today was not going to be normal after all. Today would change everything. My stomach fluttered with nerves as I hustled about my room. I needed to prepare, but I also needed to make sure Mama didn't find out my plan. I carefully picked out my nicest school outfit, a yellow dress with a matching cardigan, rolled socks, and bowling shoes. I added a yellow band to my dark curly hair to complete my look. It was important to look good today because I might end up on television. Instead of adding my school books to my school bag, I quickly tossed in a change of clothing, a toothbrush, and a hairbrush. I wasn't planning on coming home that night. When I walked downstairs to the kitchen, Mama had prepared a lovely breakfast of eggs and toast for me. I sat down and tried to stay calm as I ate. If Mama knew my plan, she would never let me leave the house. After I ate, I kissed Mama on the cheek, gave her my love, and hurried out the door. On my way to the school building, I stopped by Susie and Karen's house. Susie and Karen were twins, and they were my best friends. We always walked to school together. When I knocked on their door, the twins threw it open and rushed out. Their eyes sparkled with excitement. Abby, today's the day. I can't believe it's really happening. We began the short walk to school and reviewed our plan. Okay, said Karen, we all have our stuff, right? Clothing and toothbrush? Yes, Susie and I replied. Karen continued, when we get the signal this morning, we will need to sneak out of class and hurry to the church. That's where the meeting place will be. Once we are there, hopefully Reverend Bevel will tell us what to do next. What if the teachers try to stop us? We just have to figure it out. We have no choice. We have to march today. You're right, said Susie. Birmingham, Alabama needs to desegregate, and nothing else has worked. It's 1963 for crying out loud. It's so shameful that our city segregates black and white people. I don't want to be forced to go to a segregated school just because of my skin color. I don't want to be forced to drink from segregated water fountains. And don't forget what Mrs. Thomas taught us, Susie continued. The Constitution of the United States promises every American equal protection of the law. The government is already supposed to be giving us equal rights. We must demand that they fulfill their promises. I exclaimed, I really want to be able to sit down at the counter of Joe's Diner and order a hamburger just like white kids can do. North Carolina and Tennessee already desegregated their restaurants. Now it's our turn. Karen added, I just want to walk down the street without feeling in danger. We've had 60 unsolved bombings these past few years. It's not safe for black people living here. Bull Corner, the Commissioner of Public Safety, doesn't do anything to protect us from hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan. As we arrived at school that day, we felt a deep sense of pride. Reverend Martin Luther King had been trying to get a big march going in Birmingham for a long time, but it hadn't worked. It was a big risk for adults to march because they might get arrested. Mama told me that she wanted to march, but she was afraid her boss would fire her from the cleaning company she worked for. If she were fired over this, it would be hard to find another job. My mother had raised me alone since my father died, and she couldn't risk unemployment. Our parents couldn't march for justice, but we could. That's why we packed overnight bags. Today, children would fill the streets and demand the equality and justice that our government should guarantee us. We would march and we would probably be arrested and thrown in prison. We were willing to face these consequences because we knew the segregation laws were wrong. The school day started normally, but during second period, we looked outside and saw a teen boy holding up a sign that said, It's time. Our eyes widened, and we all looked at our teacher to see how she would react. She smiled at us knowingly. Now, students, said Mrs. Thomas, I'm going to turn around and write on the blackboard for a moment. She turned her back and stood. She was giving us an opportunity to escape. All of a sudden, every student in the room stood up and rushed to the windows to jump right out. Can you imagine? I never thought I'd feel so proud for skipping school. As we ran towards the church, we saw children and teenagers flooding down the streets from every direction. We saw teenagers, that says, hoping it should be hopping out of cars and deboarding buses. Teenagers had traveled to Birmingham from other towns in Alabama. This was going to be huge. This is our moment, Karen said breathlessly. How can they stop us? Yes, Susie yelped. May 2nd, 1963 is going to be in the history books, and we will be a part of it. I was still nervous. I'd seen images on TV of civil rights marchers and protesters being beaten by mobs, and I wasn't sure I could handle something so intense, but I didn't feel like I had a choice. We all packed into the church. It was like a big pep rally. The Reverend was speaking to the crowd, getting everyone excited. Children were dancing, singing, and clapping. The energy in the room was electric. You could feel the hope in the air. With all these other children around me, I started feeling a little less scared. Then we started marching. The Reverend sent us out in groups of 50 at a time. We marched and sang, holding signs with our message. We'd been instructed to use no violence and not to resist arrest. So when the police arrested us, we kept singing. We sang in the police van and sang right into the prison cells. When I was pushed into the prison cell, I realized my whole 8th grade class was there. We could see children and teenagers of all ages. We lay down on the floor using our cardigans as blankets and tried to get some sleep. The next morning, children in my cell were released. We stepped out into the morning sun and looked around. We could see more children running towards the park. Instead of going home, Karen, Susie, and I hurried to join them. We didn't want to miss a single moment. Plus, we'd already been arrested once. We were not afraid anymore. As we arrived in the park, we were met with a startling scene. The police were there, but they also had big, scary dogs. And fire trucks were there, too. Why are the fire trucks here? Asked Susie. Susie's question was answered right away. The police officers unrolled big hoses from the truck and started to spray heavy water into crowds of children. Before we knew it, we were being hit with the water, too. I had no idea that water could hurt so much. I was knocked right off my feet into the wet grass. I felt like I'd been hit by a car. Water was in my eyes and I could barely see straight. I felt out of control and helpless. I didn't know what to do. I could hear children screaming all over the park. Was it over? Was this the moment they defeated us? Then I felt a hand grab mine. I was pulled to my feet. Another hand grabbed my other side. I blinked the water from my eyes and saw that I was standing strong with 9 other children at my sides. We held hands tight and started singing out freedom as loud as we could. We didn't move and we didn't stop singing until the officers came and grabbed us. And just like that, I was back in prison for another night and then another. I stayed in prison for 7 more nights. We tried to keep our spirits up by singing and talking, but we started to wonder if we'd ever get out. Then, on May 10th, an officer came and started opening cells. We all flooded out onto the streets. I realized they were releasing everyone. We had won. It was a victory march. I marched down the main street with my friends and classmates, waves of emotion coming over us. What does this mean? I wondered. Have we really accomplished our goal? When I got back home, Mama was standing on the porch. I'd never seen such a look on her face. Pride was mingled with anger and relief. Abby, she gasped. Oh my goodness, you scared me half to death. That night over dinner, Mama filled me in on what had happened. The federal government had come down to Birmingham and insisted that the city desegregate. A month later, I sat on the couch in front of our small television. President Kennedy was about to speak. This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds, he said. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Now the time has come for this nation to fulfill its promise. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The president had seen our march. The world had seen our march. And finally, change was coming. Not just for Birmingham, but for the whole country.